This episode of Let's Bring It In is brought to you by Platinum Black. What is Platinum Black? Well, they're a strategic marketing and advertising consultancy built for teams who already have great instincts, but need a partner to help them go bigger and faster. And on a personal note, I've freelanced with this company and they're terrific. I've known their ECD for years. The managing director, I think, is whip smart and driven to deliver. Whenever I've worked with this group, the whole team has been engaged and dedicated to solving the client's problems. Lots of brain power, lots of enthusiasm going on there. Platinum Black works alongside in-house teams to uncover new growth opportunities, sharpen strategy, and make the kind of creative that works harder for your business. If you're ready to outgrow your market, check them out at platinumblack.com. And now, here's the show. This is Let's Bring It In, the podcast about creative leaders doing great work in-house. I'm Greg Christensen. My guest today is Case Lawrence, founder of Sky Zone and author of Off the Ground. Case is a different kind of guest than we usually have on this show because he's not a creative director or an in-house marketing guy. He's an entrepreneur who built the world's first trampoline park brand and then scaled it to a global experience. So you're going to hear about leadership, risk, and resilience. And I'll tell you, Case and I go way back. In our early 20s, we were both missionaries in Budapest. So stick around to the end and you might hear a little Hungarian. Let's bring it in. Case Lawrence, welcome to Let's Bring It In. This is so fun to have you here. You are a different type of guest than we usually have because you're not a creative director by trade. You're not a CMO, but what you do and what you've done, I think really relates to this audience. So according to your LinkedIn profile, you're a founder, a teacher, and an author. Can you give us a little color to that? How do you describe what you do and how you've spent your career?
A newly stamped author. I'm new to that for sure, but yeah, my background, Greg, by the way, I'm a big fan of the podcast. I love hearing you guys talk about the creative process and about marketing, and it's I do come at it from a little different perspective. I'm the founder of a company called Sky Zone. Originally it was called Circus Tricks, and we rebranded here a few years ago to Sky Zone. We're the largest owner, operator, and franchisor of trampoline parks in the world. And so we are a consumer brand. We're dealing with marketing all the time. And we have a pretty unique history with our brand, and we've dealt with some interesting challenges along the way, which is one of the reasons I love your podcast. But we can talk about that as we go. I stepped down as CEO of Sky Zone at the end of 2019, right before COVID set in. And
did that turn out to be really good for you or a missed opportunity? Because there are a lot of different things that happened in 2020.
It ended up not being the gentle transition that I expected, because I ended up staying a lot more involved on the board as chairman than I had planned to because of COVID. So it was necessary and I guess good in retrospect, but it wasn't, like so many things in life, it wasn't what I had planned or was hoping for. But that was an interesting time. And when I did make that transition, I also began teaching at BYU at the Marriott School of Business. And since 2020, I've taught entrepreneurship and experience design there. And in doing that, over a couple of years, you learn to articulate principles and insights, and you learn to mash them up with your own experiences and hone that through various semesters of teaching. And I realized that after a few years, I ought to take that and put it into a book and kind of memorialize some of these lessons and insights with the real life stories that I experienced in building the trampoline park industry and kind of turn them into case studies a little bit. So the stories in this book are parallel to the stories I'm teaching in entrepreneurship at BYU.
So first of all, I don't remember, I didn't go to BYU, but I don't even remember having like any entrepreneurial classes. And I know my daughter's at BYU and she hasn't been taught by you yet, but she's in an entrepreneurial class.
Yeah.
I like that. To me, that's just what an awesome opportunity and what a necessary class to have. What kind of things are you teaching in an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
class?
Well, to that point, Greg, it's come a long way. And same with me. We didn't have entrepreneurship when I was there. Now you can actually major in entrepreneurship at BYU at least. And that's certainly true at, I think a number of top schools across the country. And many schools have great programs. But at BYU, it has come so far. And not only do they have great teaching and content and academic coursework, but they have this sandbox program, really a tip of the spear program where you can start a business at BYU and basically be a full-time student and get full-time credit for running your business. And all of the mentoring and assistance and frankly funding they also provide through that. So the resources that are available, not just to study entrepreneurship, but to actually engage in entrepreneurship as a student these days. I mean, it would have been hard for me to stay in school with that, or to not take advantage of these back then if they'd had it. So yeah, it's come a long way. Nothing like when you and I were there.
Well, what I think is fascinating is I think a lot of people who are interested in entrepreneurship, you can make the argument, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to spend
Yeah.
my time. I don't want to waste my time spending money to go to all these classes. I want to get out and start making something. But if you have that kind of program, I mean,
Yeah.
that's an investment right there. I'll give a shout out to BYU because they also have their ad lab,
Oh
which
yeah.
I think is one of the easily that and maybe University of Texas in Austin are the two best
Mm.
undergraduate programs. SMU's got a really good program too, but the BYU Ad Lab,
Yeah.
it's doing the same thing for advertising though.
Yeah.
You're going in and you're getting a jump on your career before you've even graduated. So it's, I mean, the
Yeah.
entrepreneur thing, they're doing that as well.
They're doing it well. And frankly, University of Utah's got a great program. The Lasande Institute is doing great stuff too. So Utah in general, that's what I'm familiar with. But there's some great programs. Great time to be studying entrepreneurship as a student.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Sky Zone a little bit. Now, I do want to get into your book for sure. But when you were building the business, I'm curious, like what, and I guess this is back when it was Circus Tricks. What were your instincts around marketing? How early did you start to think about it, and what role did it play in the company's growth?
Well, it's really core to the way our company grew and scaled because, I bootstrapped my first trampoline park in 2011. It was in Central California. Borrowed, begged, did some weird deals. They're all talked about in the book to get this thing funded, my first trampoline park. It cost me $430,000. I still have the spreadsheet of the budget as I was spending money. And we got it open. And the problem was I had no money left to market. And so that was a challenge. And I had this faith that this idea was new enough, novel enough, wacky enough that it would create its own center of gravity and get its own attention, its own earned attention. But a friend of mine at the time, this was when Facebook was still sort of frontier new back then. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine told me, hey, you can actually create a page on Facebook and market your business for free. And the free part got me. And so I actually joined Facebook in order to, that's how long ago this was, but I joined Facebook in order to create a page for this trampoline park. And as we were building the park, I would post pictures and kind of put awareness out there and build up the suspense that this thing was opening. And they also it was during their beta period with the commercial pages, they let you actually do a campaign for free. So you could actually target and try to build followers for free at that time on your Facebook page. So that became the entire crux of our marketing. That we couldn't afford anything else. It forced us to engage with social media at a time when that was really tip of the spear and the frontier. And we were fortunate to have a business that was especially prone and driven by word of mouth marketing. And so it was great. And we built off of that. And, there weren't a lot of best practices. There weren't a lot of, frankly, there wasn't a lot of money yet at that time in really honed social media campaigns. So we were making it up and making our own discoveries as we went about how to market these things, and learned a lot.
Well, at the time, I'm trying to remember, like when I was first on Facebook, you didn't have this sea of social media. I mean, I don't think there was no Snapchat. If Instagram were around,
No,
it wasn't what it is. LinkedIn, I think, was around, but no one was really using it for.
right.
So was Facebook, looking back, was kind of Facebook the
Yeah,
only option for social media?
yeah,
Did that make things better for you? Was it
yeah,
nice to just be able to focus rather than
yeah,
say, well, should we be on TikTok or should we be on Snapchat?
yeah. That's insightful. That's exactly right. It was all Facebook. That's all there was. That's what we could focus on. About 2 years into that journey, Instagram became a thing and really started having momentum. And we can talk about how that affected our business. But yeah, it was all Facebook. And one of the features at that time was you could check in on Facebook. And like you said, Facebook was still sparse enough that someone checking in at a physical location would get in their feed and actually get run in their feed. So one of the first things we did is we gave anyone who came in, people ask us, are you going to do coupons? Are you going to do discounts? We said, we have a 24/7, 365-day coupon at our parks. And that is, if you check in on Facebook, you get $1 off. And everyone who came at that time would check in. And it created this tsunami of social media activity and engagement. And so that was a hack back then that we came to really quick, especially for a brick and mortar local location business that really worked well for us. Doesn't really work anymore, but that was a thing.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, I'm remembering when that was
Yeah.
the only social media that I had to worry about. Let me ask, because after Circus Tricks started going, you actually called me. I was working for a really big ad agency at the time, and I think I put you in contact with some people, and I think you had a meeting with some people at that agency. I'm curious to know. Frankly, it to me, I know you didn't go with us, and I think that was definitely the right choice because it was too big. You would have been paying a lot of fees for a lot of overhead, and I think that you being the type of company that you were, you needed a company to match. So what were your thoughts? I'd love to know your thoughts in terms of why didn't go with a big agency? Did you consider bringing anything in-house? How did you stay scrappy and make things work for you at that time?
Yeah. To answer that, Greg, let me give you a little context about where we were when you and I had those discussions, and because it was a key pivot point. I mentioned this first trampoline park I created, then there were 2, then there were 3, then 4, then 5, and we were growing these things on a one-off basis with different brands. So they were local. We were treating them like local businesses where each one had its own local name and identity. There was no brand across these different parks, and there were some reasons we had been doing that. We had kept them separate and siloed, both legally and from a brand standpoint, for liability purposes. Early on in the trampoline park market, insurance was high, liability was high, and insurance was difficult to obtain. And so there was an actual strategy of kind of decentralizing and having these independent brands. So a different brand in Richmond, Virginia, different one in Dallas, Texas, different one in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And
so wait, and I don't mean to be indelicate about this, but so is one of the reasons, like if I go and I break my arm in the Virginia one, Circus Tricks as a whole isn't liable for that. It's the Virginia one. So it kind of insulates you. That's fascinating.
And that was not just legally, but also reputationally. We wanted we because we didn't understand the liability yet. And the perception was, wow, we're jumping on trampolines here. This is somewhat fraught. Let's be careful. And so that really drove our strategy. And we got to a point where we had 25, 30 of these parks open, each one under a different name, a different brand, each one utilizing social media primarily for marketing, which was working. It was great. We had our formula, we had our training for the people doing this at each park, but we came to that point in scale where we realized that we weren't tapping into any brand power at all. That there was no macro brand energy behind this, and that if we were going to continue to grow, it would be just a wasted opportunity not to try to harness that, build it, and leverage it. And so that's when I began reaching out. And of course, who did I reach out to? The master himself, who I knew, GRC, and to begin teaching me and guiding me about what do we need to do to harness the brand power here and turn this into a brand. And so that began an education for me that I was totally, frankly, unprepared for, and I learned so much. And we got there with a couple stops and starts and false starts. So I really grew to appreciate the hard way the power and how difficult it is to build a brand like that. And now here we are, and we're in a good place, but we've spent a lot of money and a lot of treasure and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get there.
Do you currently use agency partners or design company? I mean, do you currently have partners that you use, or do you have anyone on the inside doing any of the work?
We're now inside. We've built it all out inside, but we've worked with other groups, outside groups, and I can mention some of those if you'd like.
I mean, you can shout them out, but but I am curious. I am curious about what you're doing on the inside, because I mean, my point of view would have been the first thing to do. You get but at the time, I don't know that there was the trend that there is today. Today, you'll have, award-winning creative directors who are willing to go in-house. This is a few years ago where I think you probably would have had fewer people willing to do that. But certainly, I think that's for what you were building, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah. We, I think now I understand that better. When we brought in our first chief marketing person, we brought them from the sports world. They came from the Utah Jazz, and they were great. And they brought more of a, it was less on the creative, but kind of traditional marketing organization and blocking and tackling there. And we needed that. Like I said, we had this far-flung, fragmented organization of these parks. So that was good. We ended up working with an agency. Our first big creative project, we worked with an agency in Seattle, a group called Retail Voodoo, who great group, great creatives there. Loved the process of working with them, and just had a really, really positive experience. They had done a lot of consumer, actually a lot of food was their real expertise. They'd done a lot of food brands, and so that was my first experience with a creative agency at that level. And then right when we had completed this incredible project with them, and I mean, I was so happy with what we had come to with them, we were presented with an opportunity to acquire our biggest competitor in the market. And that was Sky Zone. And they did have a brand. And so, and it was just too good an opportunity to pass up. So we ended up doing that acquisition, and it didn't totally just render moot everything we'd done with Retail Voodoo, but it changed kind of the strategy of what we were trying to accomplish, because now we had this existing macro brand, Sky Zone, to work with, and we made the decision to try to refurbish that and unite under that. And that was a whole nother big project to kind of rebrand under Sky Zone.
So this is fascinating to me. If I get this right, so you've got Circus Tricks and Sky Zone. Circus Tricks is at the time bigger, more rapidly growing, more capital, more brand power, and yet Sky Zone has a better, more recognizable brand. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that's exactly right.
And so the bigger company acquires the smaller company,
Yeah.
but then they use their brand because the
Yeah.
brand's stronger.
A lot of that, Greg, it goes back to the fact that we had two different business models. So Circus Tricks was an owned and operated model. We owned all of these individual trampoline parks with all these different names. We owned them, we managed them. Sky Zone was in the franchise business. So they were, by definition, building a brand, and that's what they were leveraging and selling to their franchisees. So they had to be in that business, and they were better at it. And so when we joined those, they had already been thinking about brand and doing the blocking and tackling for a long time. And it was just the natural thing to do, to take their brand and layer it on all of these disparate, oddly named parks.
Huh. Well, and both companies, though, I think and I think you had even said this, were kind of built on novelty. I mean, they're built on
Yeah.
something that people hadn't experienced before. And so when you became Sky Zone, and it's the single entity, as the brand begins to scale, how did you think about keeping the experience fresh?
Yeah.
Because you've got to avoid becoming yesterday's idea when
Yeah.
the growth depends on
Oh,
consistency.
it's, when you have a location-based business, that the business model are visits, return visits become your core metric, right? They become your core statistic. And we live in a world with short attention spans. And the hardest thing in the world to do is get someone to return to have an experience a second time. And it requires novelty. We learned, and one of the advantages in the adventure park space is that we can create novelty on a much cheaper budget and time schedule than the attraction business historically. So, you grew up going to Lagoon or Disneyland. To do a new roller coaster at Lagoon or Disneyland is going to be, millions of dollars, and something that is going to be a fundamental capital fact for the company that's going to affect their whole bottom line. But they do it because they know the novelty is crucial. And it gives an automatic excuse, an automatic reason for people to come back and experience that new thing. Well, we have that same dynamic, but the good news is, in an adventure park, a trampoline park, early on, we could roll out a new attraction for $50,000. Now that price has gone up, but still for a couple $100,000, we can roll out a well-produced experience that has enough oomph to give us novelty that we can talk about on social media, that we can focus on and create that excuse to come back. And so early on, we developed a schedule that we knew we had to have a new attraction every 12 months. And that was, we just stayed on that schedule. And so we had the lab going, where we were experimenting, trying new things, rolling things out. Some failed, some were a hit. The reasons why some failed and some were a hit totally, boggled my rationale. And I tell about this in the book. We had a lot of success rolling out really the first ninja obstacle courses in a trampoline park format. My kids were big fans of the show, and we realized there was no place you could go to actually participate in a ninja obstacle course. And so we had taken that and created a version that was streamlined and simplified for a trampoline park, and it had been a hit. And we were real happy about that. But then we had to keep coming up with new ideas. And so I had spent months working on a trapeze attraction. And when we'd hired a trapeze consultant, engineers, the whole thing, and when they finally presented this thing to me, Greg, I thought, this is a complete and utter dud. It is a total failure. It is so boring and so lame. No one's going to want to do this. But we had so much investment bias in it. We'd sunk too much sunk cost. We'd already invested in it. And we thought, let's go ahead and roll it out. We did, and it was wildly successful. And it wasn't until after the fact that we figured out why it was successful, even though it was so obvious and so basic. And the reason why was that Instagram was just getting traction, and that because of Instagram, there was a premium on a 5 to 15 second video snippet. And for some reason, this trapeze was the perfect 7-second video snippet of your kid, on a horizontal phone video. And so it became the tail wag the dog.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the kids loved the trapeze. It was that every mom in our parks required their kid to do a video of the trapeze before they left. And so it became just a really highly utilized part of the park, and a whole nother reason for people to come. So the reasons these attractions would make it were wide, but they did by and large.
Gosh, that's amazing. Now, I would love to know though. So if you're trying to come up with some new novelty, something that's going to bring people in every 12 months, what does that look like? Is there like a little brain trust of 5 people that comes together, and you like walk me through just briefly, like what does it look like to be in a company and have sort of some kind of think tank where you're coming up with what's the next. We did the trampoline thing and it was great. What are we going to do next?
Yeah, we actually came up with a name for our group, and it started with that ninja course we rolled out. And so we had this group called the Ninjineers. That was their name. And they were tasked
that would look great on a LinkedIn bio.
Wouldn't it look great? Yeah, I still love that name. And that was their job, was to come up with these ideas and then to find affordable ways to roll them out. And then we also included kind of a committee. We got actual operators who were there on the ground at these parks. And we would also get our kids, the kids who worked at the parks, my own kids. We knew that we had to see through the lens, through their eyes. And so we would get their suggestions. We had an ongoing bounty throughout the growth of Circus Tricks and then Sky Zone. We had an ongoing bounty amongst employees and just my kids and their friends and anyone else who was interested. If you came up with an idea or a suggestion that led to a new attraction, it was a $5,000 bounty to you for coming up with that. And we had several great, it brought out, it crowdsourced the creativity and the ideas. And so we had no shortage of ideas, and then we had to vet them in terms of what was feasible to roll out in the parks. But we created this culture really of frontier creativity where we were taking it from any source, whatever source it may come from. We had to, and that was so fun.
I've got to ask, were there any absolute crazy ideas that still stick in your memory?
Oh yeah, the most crazy, and I won't put on blast the person who came up with this idea, who's still a great friend of mine. But he was obsessed with this idea called the dead man's drop, where we would elevate someone, basically what would be a play casket. We didn't call it that, but with doors, trap doors, and that there would be a button where your friends could push a button and drop you over a foam pit. And it was the dead man's drop. And so we spent time and energy trying to develop that, and it never worked. And that actually led to one of the things we realized is the more reliant you were on mechanical processes in these parks, not a good idea, because they'd always be broken. They'd always be troubleshooting.
Interesting.
And so if you could come up with things that were naturally kinetic, that people could just more of a playground paradigm that people could play with, that didn't rely on mechanical systems, you were always better off.
Oh, that's fascinating. I see a lot of similarities with that thought. And for example, I know in advertising, any idea that I come up with that requires my clients to do more heavy lifting than they're willing to do
Yeah.
is dead on arrival. If I come up with an idea and I say, here's this brilliant idea, but you are going to have to change your pricing model or offer a
Yeah.
coupon, or you're going to have to open up something, or like you're going to have to spend money to do something for my idea. It's just,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
Right.
It also makes me think, I don't know why this came to mind, maybe because he had mentioned Disneyland. For a long time, I always thought, you go to Disneyland, they have the Matterhorn. You see the Matterhorn as you're driving into Anaheim. There are no other Disneyland properties that have a Matterhorn. They've got other Pirates of the Caribbeans and they've got other adventure cruises, but they don't have the Matterhorn. And if you go to Disneyland, the Matterhorn is always broken.
Yeah.
And there's something about that ride that it's always broken, and they've just said, we're not going to do any more of these because it's
they know that on the inside that's driving that decision.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Well, look, I want to talk about your book now. So you've got I've got my copy here. You've got Off the Ground by Case Lawrence. Walk me through a few of if you had to distill this book into one core lesson for builders or leaders or entrepreneurs, what would that lesson be?
I love how you frame that. I think, there are several lessons. There are kind of 7 major takeaways I have in the book, but the key takeaway, I think, for leaders, and this applies across industries, across organizations, across structures. We talk a lot about fight or flight response, which is proven and true in human beings as biological creatures, right? When we're attacked physically, that's true. As leaders, when crisis hits, it's a little different response. When we're hit with complicated crises that overwhelm us, the more natural human response is paralysis. And, one of the key takeaways is that when you're hit with crisis, especially external crisis, unexpected happenings that affect your business, as a leader, you've got to be proactive. You've got to act, and you've got to be quick in acting. It's never the right answer to just wait it out and hope things will self-resolve. There's sometimes this temptation that when things are overly complicated, things will settle out, and the picture will settle, and that's certainly true. But it doesn't change your responsibility as a leader to be proactive. And that's, I really try to illustrate that in the book in several situations. And, my experience at Circus Tricks and Sky Zone really supports that. Building a business like Sky Zone, it was one crisis after another. I mean, that's really the constant of the whole experience, was just crisis to crisis, whether it was, a big lawsuit in Alabama, whether it was our first foray into Europe to grow parks internationally, right up through COVID. All of these turned into big crises. And so dealing with those, the answers were different in every one, but the answer always involved action and moving quickly and being proactive.
Is there any thought to, I'm going to act, and if it's wrong, I can change my mind? Or because I feel like some people, when they don't act, the part of the paralysis is, if we go down the wrong path, then we're stuck, or then we're I'd love to hear a little bit about, yes, I believe that you need to act. What if your actions prove to be, they're not working?
Right. No, that totally agree. And I struggle with that. Part of it is this thinking that we all have, that there's always going to be one action or one response that is the silver bullet that's going to solve everything. And in reality, as leaders, usually, it's going to be a dog pile of actions that are going to effectively solve the problem. And more importantly, if you're leading an organization and leading other people, there's solving the problem, and then there's also just the leadership piece of inspiring, motivating, and keeping the confidence of your team. Mm-hmm. And if they see you acting and experimenting and not afraid to take risks to try to solve problems, that alone is so valuable to your team. And so I always err on the side of acting and maybe making a mistake and layering that with another act if it fails, and just keep acting and keep dogpiling on, because if nothing else, what you want your team to see is that you're not watching, you're not waiting, you're trying to solve the problem, and you get so much mileage out of that from a team standpoint. So that's what I lean into. That's what I counsel others to lean into. There's never, hardly ever, that one silver bullet solution that if you wait long enough or smart enough, you're going to come up with it and it's going to solve the whole thing. There are very few problems in this world that get solved that way. It's more, you just literally flood the zone with solutions and people and ideas. And that's the best way to solve these things.
Years ago, probably 10 years ago, I was shooting a commercial in LA with a director. His name was Ray Dillman. And we're in a casting call, having all these actors come by to, read a few lines and see if we want to use them. And during one break, he just turned to me and just said, "Greg, do you want to know what it takes to be a director?" And I didn't really have any aspirations to do that, but I was like, "Yeah, tell me." And he just takes out a piece of paper and he writes yes and no. And he says, "Know the difference between either of those, both of these, and don't be afraid to say either one, but you have to say one or the other. You can say one and then change your mind." But he said, as a director, you can't ever say, if someone says, "Where do you want to put the lights?" You can't say, I don't know. Like, what do you think? You can't take a vote on where are the lights. How many takes should we do? I don't know. What do you guys think? He said, as soon as you do that, then you're not the director. You can always say, let's put the lights over there and start shooting and say, no, those aren't good. Let's put them over here.
Yeah.
But that's always just stuck with me that
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to commandeer that story in my class because I absolutely love it. I think decisiveness is the most underrated characteristic in leadership and frankly, like you're saying, creative leadership, especially.
Okay, here's a quick 30-second break to help you fuel someone's Olympic dreams. Sam Allred is an Olympic hopeful in the skeleton. That's the sport where athletes sprint and dive onto a sled and race down headfirst on an ice track at highway speeds. Sam trains year-round, covers most of his own travel and equipment costs, and is doing everything he can to represent Team USA on the world stage. If you'd like to know more about Sam and support his journey, even a small donation is going to make a difference, visit samuelallred.org. All right, let's get back to the conversation with Case.
Let me ask, Case, who did you write this book for? Or who do you hope, who do you most hope picks it up?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, it was for young entrepreneurs and students. That's who I envisioned in my mind as I wrote it. That's who I've been looking at as I've been teaching and telling these stories for the last 5 years. And so it's kind of in that voice that I wanted to get these stories on paper for other budding entrepreneurs and students of entrepreneurship. So that was really what I was going for. And then, on a more niche basis, my own family, it's like anything. My own kids now have read this book. They lived through this experience. And invariably, each one of them said, I had no idea about this, or I didn't know that. And I just naively thought they were as up to speed on all these details as I was, having lived through them. But you realize that you can't take that for granted. That's not the case. And so I wanted to record a lot of these stories for my family and make a record. And then, the third part I would just mention is I was fortunate to do my entrepreneuring in an industry that was brand new, that there was no historical precedent for, and be able to be a witness and watch this new industry take form. And so I felt a little responsibility to the industry and to the others who, who participated in that, to document the history of it for the future. And I actually had a lot of fun taking on that part.
That's the idea of this being not your sole legacy, but this to be an artifact of your legacy that'll outlive you is really a pretty cool thing. Now, you say your kids had, were surprised and didn't know anything about it. Your wife basically knew everything, right? Like you can
Yeah.
give a shout out to her because I imagine being an entrepreneur, she had a lot to. You got a lot of support from her, I'm imagining.
Yeah. That's one of the big lessons that I teach in entrepreneurship when I speak to young entrepreneurs, maybe less so students, but more people who are in the thralls of entrepreneurship now, is the key to having an entrepreneurial dynamic in marriage or with a partner, that your spouse is what I call the silent founder, the silent partner, because they are subject to all the risk, all the uncertainty, all of the ramifications, good and bad, of your entrepreneurship. But oftentimes they are the least acquainted with the risk and the perilous nature of some of the things you're facing. And we do that as good partners, as good spouses. We protect our spouse from bad news. We protect them from the stress or the risk that we're dealing with on a daily basis. But that will come back to haunt you. I have so many examples of marriages that were broken up or relationships broken up when an entrepreneurial business broke up. And it's because of that. It's the information flow was not there. And so it's really important. You have to be super intentional at communicating with that silent founder, that spouse who's part of the entrepreneurship but is not there every day.
Yeah. I want to ask about your son because I'm thinking of, you have one son who's an entrepreneur himself, right? He started the candy company, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, just because, to give him a shout out so people can go buy his stuff if they want to. But like, how did were you surprised that he took on his own business?
He's an entrepreneurial kid, so I guess in general it didn't surprise me. But the curiosity and the interest that he sort of zoned in on was totally a surprise to me. He got interested in this real niche world of extreme sour gummies, which, Greg, you'll be happy to note there's a whole world out there in Germany and in Sweden and everywhere. And so he got into this and researched it and went down that rabbit hole, and he started a sour gummy business. It's called Mother Pucker. And I'm partial, of course, but I think it's just a great product, great brand, great texture, great flavor. And it has been one of the funnest father-son adventures we could have, because it's an opportunity for him to learn about entrepreneurship and me to mentor him in entrepreneurship without forcing the issue. And so it's been a great vehicle for that. He's learned a ton. He's killed it. He's done great. I've had a blast watching it happen. I've eaten a lot of candy, and so it couldn't be better.
Okay, so if people want to try Mother Pucker, where do they go? Where can they get
motherpucker.info or motherpuckercandy.com. Yeah, do yourself a favor. The watermelon especially are my favorite. So,
and if people want to buy a copy of Off the Ground by you, where should they go? Where's the best place to get that?
It's for pre-order now on Amazon, and encourage them to go, and maybe I can send you the link for the show notes you can put in there. But yeah, they can pre-order now on Amazon, and I think it's a fun ride.
Okay. Well, Case, this is so great. Any parting advice that you might have for any budding entrepreneurs
Oh, you know, make the jump, do it. Entrepreneurship, there's a difference between something being scary or something being dangerous. Entrepreneurship is scary, but it's not dangerous. And that you have to keep that in mind. Make the jump. If you have an idea, if you are wanting to take some risk and build something, create something, I just can't help but always encourage you to make the jump. You will not regret it in general.
I love that balance or that contrast of scary and dangerous. I remember during the pandemic, something that struck me was, we always talk about the fear of the unknown.
Mm.
And during the pandemic, I didn't know if my agency, what was going to happen to that. I don't think anyone at the agency knew. Our clients didn't know. I mean, no one knew anything that was,
Yeah.
I mean, back when we were, my largest client was the Home Depot, and we were having to do ads about, don't worry about having to wait in line to get into the store. It was just so weird. But I remember thinking, there's fear of the unknown, and then there's just kind of mild discomfort of the unknown.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm living with mild discomfort of the unknown, that's fine.
Yeah. Right. That's kind of the pose of faith in which we all go through life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Case, I always close with a bonus question.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with anything that we've been talking about. So if you're in an airport and you can get on any plane going anywhere, cost isn't a factor, time isn't a factor, you can choose who goes with you. Where are you going to go and why? And you get one domestic location and one international.
Oh, wow. Well, my domestic location is tried and true. I'm gonna head to Orange County and go to the beach, specifically Strands Beach, and I'm gonna go get tacos at Sancho's, and then I'm gonna go and bring out the surfboards and surf at Strands Beach. So that's an easy one there. That's my happy place. Domestically or internationally, Greg, how do I get on here with you and not say Budapest, Hungary is where I would go and buy a unlimited bearlet.
I thought bearlet or longosh, sure, either one.
And
one's
a longosh
edible
too. Yeah, right off the plane, get a longosh and a subway pass and just hit the ground in Hungary would be my dream. 2 days, 3 days.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit because this is worth talking about. You and I, for those who don't know, you and I first met in 1993, February 1993. We were both missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Budapest, Hungary. You had been there for over a year, and new missionaries are always given a trainer. Everyone goes out, in twos, and new ones are always given a trainer to kind of show them the ropes. And, especially if you're not speaking your native tongue, then someone can do the talking while the other one just sits dumbfounded. And you were my trainer. I was assigned to you, or it was a fantastic blessing to be
you
assigned.
You were my greenie, as they say.
Yeah. Different
in
lives,
Kish
different
Pesh.
countries.
Yeah.
Kish Pesh. That was the 18th district or the 21st? I can't remember. It was one of those.
Chepel, remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
There were some great spots there, and you and I had a great time. You were ahead of your time, brother, in every way. You were you were amazing. And it was so fun. It was just fun to spend time with you. I learned so much. Forget missionary work.
Well,
I learned so much about life and creativity from you. You were a wonder kind.
Well, I mean, for 2 months, we didn't just live with each other. We were like side by side with each other for 2 months, which is that's
a lot.
You can't not learn. Do you when you think about those early experiences, though, have they shaped how you've gone through, how you've built business, or how you've approached life from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Yeah, just in terms of self-awareness and learning about myself, I didn't even realize till later in my entrepreneurial journey, when I was in Hungary, both before and after I served with you, I was in a group early in my mission where we went and opened the city of Miskolc. There were 4 of us. They dropped us there. This is a big city, probably the second or third biggest city in Hungary. They dropped us there and said, open this city. And, I remember the weekly goal setting and kind of the vision of we were trying to go 0 to 1, right? We were trying to build something and getting people to church and building this little branch. And I realized it was this incredible experience in entrepreneurship. And later at the end of my mission, I had a chance to do it again. I went to Szeged to open the city of Szeged, and same thing. It was this 0 to 1 experience, and I didn't appreciate it for that at the time. I just knew I loved that challenge and that type of project. My mission president at one time, I was serving in the office of our mission, and this is while you were there, and he gave me the choice. He's like, do you want to stay in the office, or would you rather go open this city? We got permission to open the city. I said, 1,000 to 1, I want to go and open this city. I just loved that. And so that was a harbinger of what I now realize more fully was I love that 0 to 1 world. And so that was fun.
Okay. How good is your Hungarian 30 years later?
Na, sokat kell tanulni nekem.
Ez nehéz beszélni.
Nagyon nehéz
Nekem.
beszélni.
Hát senki sem magyar lakik Dallas, Texas államban.
Ugye?
Azért, én nem tudok beszélni senkivel.
Soha senki a magyar utában se.
Yeah. When I was in Switzerland, I worked in Geneva, and we had a very international office.
Oh, I remember.
Every once in a while, we would hire. I think in my 2 years there, we hired maybe 1 or 2, well, 2 or 3 Hungarians.
Yeah.
And they would go through the office introducing themselves, and I would, not knowing where they were from, because we had people from, almost every European country, and it was a little mini United Nations. And if they came by and they would say, well, I'm from Hungary, I would just say, akkor magyarul beszélünk. And then they would just, they'd jump back, and then they'd always ask, are you Hungarian? And I'd say no, which makes no sense.
Right. That even blows their mind further.
Yeah.
Greg, my most embarrassing moment, I went back to Hungary in 2015 with my family and actually built a trampoline park in Budapest. I don't know if you knew that.
Wow.
And so spent like a month there with the family, and the most embarrassing moment of my life, one of them, was I went to Dunaújváros, which I had spent a lot of time in and knew a lot of people there, and got up. They asked me to get up and speak in church, and I needed a translator, and I could just see on their faces like, oh, how far you've fallen, you lame disappointment.
Well, it's hard. It's a hard language to keep up. I mean, if I'd learned Spanish, I'd speak it every day in Texas. But
yeah.
Well, I had a better experience. I went back 2 years just to kind of backpack around, and I went to my home. One of the places close to my heart was in Veszprém.
Oh.
And I just sat through church, but at the end they asked me to say the closing prayer.
Yeah.
And the branch president, who's now the stake patriarch, but the branch president, he just looked at me and he just said, "Ügyes," which is Hungarian for, like clever or good for you. And I was like, oh, I got an ügyes from it.
If you got an ügyes, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Veszprém, what a city, man. I didn't even realize then, like now I look back more, Veszprém is like, it's like Newport Beach. I mean, it's like the resort Balaton town, just that's like the place.
I was in Veszprém for about 6 months, and that was just one of the, through Christmas and through the spring, it was, that's a place that's still pretty close to my heart.
I bet. Well,
Case Lawrence,
thanks, brother.
Founder, teacher, author of Off the Ground. trainer, lover of the Magyar Nyelv. Thanks so much for joining us on Let's Bring It In. This has really been great. Again, this is a very different type of, you're a very different type of guest that we've had on this show, but I think people are going to learn a lot from this, no matter the discipline they're in.
Well, it was fun, man. This was fun. Thanks for having me, brother.
That's it for this episode of Let's Bring It In. Huge thanks to Case Lawrence, founder, teacher, author of Off the Ground, and a really good friend. Off the Ground's available for pre-order on Amazon, so be sure to get it there, and be sure to go to motherpucker.info for some pretty good candy as well. If you want to hear more interviews with creative leaders from places like Liquid Death, Yeti, Whole Foods, Spotify, Dude Wipes, and more, visit letsbringitin.com. Our music was composed by Nick Patronella, and you can find more of his work on Vimeo. And of course, thanks to you for listening. Let's Bring It In is a production of Barnes Creative Bank at barnescreativebank.com.